Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
So, today we're going to dive into the core ideas from the Generational Wealth Building Bible. And look, this isn't just about getting rich. It's about figuring out how to create a financial legacy that can actually truly last. All right, so let's start with a really big question. Why is it that a fortune built over someone's entire life of hard work so often just vanishes when it's passed on? And believe it or not, this isn't some rare thing. It happens all the time. Get this, the number is just staggering. It's the core of the whole problem, 90%. That's how often family wealth is gone by the time it gets to the grandkids.
And it's how fast this happens that's so shocking. The book lays it out. 70% of that wealth is gone by the second generation. And by the third, a full 90% has just disappeared. This is the exact challenge we're here to figure out.
Okay, so this is what the book calls the 90% problem. And it's a huge deal, right? It's this destructive cycle that so many families fall into, often without even seeing it coming.
So here's the crazy part, according to the book. Making the money, as tough as that is, that's not even the hardest part. The real challenge, the final boss, is holding on to it. The wealth doesn't disappear because there wasn't enough of it, but because the next generation wasn't prepared.
So that brings us to the very first step in the solution. And it's not what you might think. Before you even touch a stock or a piece of real estate, the guide says you have to build the right foundation. Up here, in your mind. It all starts with the right mindset. You know, the book's first big idea is actually pretty simple. It all starts with how you think about money. Your entire financial future, the legacy you want to leave, it's all built on that mental foundation.
So how do you actually build this thing? Well, the guide lays out 6 key shifts. It's not about playing defense, just trying not to lose. It's about playing offense, playing to win. It's about stopping being a consumer and becoming an investor, making every dollar you have go to work. And maybe most importantly, it's about always learning, because things are always changing. This isn't just about thinking positive, it's a whole strategic game plan for your brain.
Okay, so once you've got that mindset locked in, now you're ready for the tools. And the book calls these the engines of wealth.
And it really boils down to 3 main engines, 3 powerful ways to build a fortune. You've got the stock market for that long-term growth. Then there's real estate for creating those tangible assets. And of course, entrepreneurship, building your own business. And inside these engines, especially when it comes to investing, there's this force that the book says is basically magic. And that's compounding. It's the fuel that makes those wealth engines really take off over time.
Just look at this example from the book. It's incredible. If you save $100 a month for 40 years in a regular old checking account, you end up with 48 grand. Okay, not bad. But what if you invested that same $100 a month at a pretty standard 10% return? You're looking at over $500,000. That is the huge difference between just saving your money and making your money work for you.
All right, so you've got the mindset. You're using the tools. Your wealth is growing. You're done, right? Nope. This is where so many people drop the ball. Now we have to talk about protecting it all. And to do this, the book gives us a roadmap. It's called the Generational Wealth Cycle. Think of it like a 4-step plan to create, grow, protect, and then pass on your wealth correctly. So this cycle has 4 key parts. First up is creation. That's where you're just starting out, building your foundation. Then you move into enhancement. That's all about growth, making your assets work harder. Then comes the really critical part, preservation. Your goal here isn't just growth, it's protection. And finally, distribution, how you actually pass that wealth on effectively. The book makes it super clear. If you skip even one of these steps, the whole thing can just fall apart.
So what does that actually look like, protecting and distributing your wealth? Well, this is where the paperwork really matters. We're talking about a detailed will, a solid estate plan, making sure you have beneficiaries listed on every single account, and having the right kind of insurance. These aren't just boring documents. They are literally the firewalls protecting your family's future from chaos.
And this brings us to the last piece of the puzzle. And honestly, it might be the most important part of all. Because the book argues that if you only pass on money, you're pretty much setting your kids up to fail. The real goal is building a true legacy.
At the end of the day, the book's biggest message is this. Real wealth, the kind that lasts, isn't just about the numbers in a bank account. It's the stuff you can't put a price on, the wisdom, the values, the financial know-how. The money is the hardware, but the knowledge is the software that makes it all run.
So on one hand, you've got the tangible stuff, right? The stocks, the property, the cash. But on the other side, you have the intangible wealth that actually keeps it all going. Things like financial literacy, strong family values, a sense of purpose. The book is crystal clear on this. If you don't have the intangibles, the tangibles are almost guaranteed to vanish.
And all of this leads to the book's main takeaway, the secret sauce to finally breaking that 90% cycle. The single most important investment you can ever make, it's not in the stock market, it's not in real estate, it's in teaching the next generation how to handle money. That knowledge is the only key that can unlock a truly lasting legacy.
So as we finish up here, the guide leaves you with one big question to think about. It's not just about what you'll leave behind, but what you'll leave with them. Is your legacy just going to be a pile of cash, or will it be the knowledge, the mindset, and the values to make it grow for generations to come?
You know, the whole idea of building a secure future can feel, well, kind of huge and maybe even impossible. So today, we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're putting together a simple two-part toolkit. It's designed to help you not just grow your wealth, but also to handle pretty much any obstacle that life decides to throw your way.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a really direct question. All that money you've worked so hard for, the cash you've got saved up, is it actually losing its power, its value, right now, while you sleep? The tough answer for most of us is, yeah, it is. There's this invisible force out there, chipping away at every single dollar you have. And that invisible force, well, it has a name. We are all in a constant race against something called inflation. And trust me, it's a race you absolutely need a game plan to win. So what exactly is inflation? To put it simply, it's the reason why gas, groceries, housing, you name it, just keep getting more expensive. The $100 in your wallet today will literally buy you less stuff next year. So if your savings are just sitting there not growing, they're actually shrinking in terms of what you can do with them. Now, don't get me wrong, saving money is a fantastic habit. It's step one and it's absolutely crucial. But saving by itself is purely a defensive move. It's kind of like treading water. You're working hard just to stay in one place while the current of inflation is slowly pushing you backward. To actually get ahead, to win this race, you've got to go on offense. And that's where the first tool in our toolkit comes in, investing. This is how you tell your money to stop being lazy and actually get to work for you. Let's just quickly break down the difference here. Saving is perfect for short-term goals, right? Like saving for a vacation or a new laptop. It's low risk, which is great, but it's also got very low returns. Investing, that's for the long game. That's for creating real, serious wealth. Now, it does come with more risk, but that's because the potential for a much bigger payoff is there. So think of it this way. Saving protects your money, investing grows it. So why even take that risk? Well, because the reasons are completely life-changing. Investing is how you actually beat inflation. It's how you build real value over time. It is the engine that's going to power you toward those huge life goals. We're talking about retirement, buying a home, or even setting up a solid financial foundation for your family for years to come.
Okay, so if investing is the engine, there's a special kind of rocket fuel that makes it incredibly powerful over time. We need to talk about the magic of compounding.
The simplest way to think about it is interest on your interest. It's an amazing snowball effect. Your money earns a little bit, and then that new, slightly bigger pile of money earns its own return. And that process just keeps repeating over and over, getting bigger and faster. It's what creates that incredible exponential growth. Theory is cool, but an example makes this crystal clear. Let's imagine a totally doable scenario. You invest just $50 a month, every single month for 15 years. All right, so over those 15 years, the total amount of money you put in from your own pocket would be $9,000. Simple enough, right? That's your contribution. But with a pretty standard 10% annual return, that $9,000 you put in could grow to over $19,000. Just let that sink in for a second. More than half of your final account balance isn't your money. It's money that your money made for you. That is the incredible power of putting your money to work. But hey, let's be real, we all know that building anything, especially wealth, is never just a straight line going up. You're going to hit roadblocks. That's why the second tool in our toolkit isn't about making money. It's about what to do when things go wrong. Welcome to the problem-solving playbook. So what do? Whether it's a setback in your career, a snag in your business, or a dip in your investments, the unexpected is, well, something you should expect. Having a plan for when things get tough is every bit as important as having a plan for growth. And here's the key thing. Effective problem solvers aren't just lucky. They don't stumble upon miracle fixes. They have a reliable, repeatable system for figuring things out. It's not magic. It's a skill, a process you can actually learn and use yourself. We can boil this process down into 3 simple phases. First, you have to diagnose. This means you don't just put a Band-Aid on the symptoms, you dig deep to find the real root cause. Honestly, this is the most important step, because if you solve the wrong problem, you've wasted all your effort. Next, you strategize. This is where you brainstorm ideas, but the secret sauce here is to bring in different viewpoints. Get your team, your mentors, anyone who thinks differently than you involved. Finally, you execute. You take your best idea and you test it. You track the results with real numbers and you stay ready to pivot. It's about being smart with your actions. And you know that second phase, strategize, is so important. It's so important it's worth pausing on this quote from Stephen Covey. Power rests in differences, not in similarities. The best answers almost never come from a room where everyone is nodding in agreement. If your whole team thinks exactly like you do, you're probably going to miss the most creative and powerful solution. So, there we have it. 2 incredibly powerful tools, an engine to drive your growth and a playbook to navigate the messy parts. Now, let's see how they work together to create your path to genuine security. So here it is, your complete toolkit. You've got the growth engine, that's investing, playing offense to actively build your wealth. And you've got the navigation system, that's problem solving, playing defense, ready to handle whatever comes your way. When you put them together, you get this unified mindset of growth and resilience. And that combination is what builds real, unshakable security. So I'll leave you with this question, because knowing all this stuff is one thing, but taking action is everything. Looking at this toolkit, what is one small, totally manageable step you can take today? Maybe it's just setting up that automatic $50 investment, or maybe it's just grabbing a notebook and trying to diagnose a problem you've been stuck on. Whatever it is, that first small step is always the most powerful one.
When you hear the term generational wealth, what comes to mind? Sprawling estates, billion-dollar dynasties. But what if I told you it isn't just for the super rich? It's actually an achievable goal for any family that's willing to shift their mindset. All right, so let's dive in and figure out how you can build a financial legacy that lasts.
Just think about this for a second. What if the financial choices you're making today could give a real head start to your kids, your grandkids, and even their kids? That's the kind of power we're going to unpack today.
So here's our game plan for the next few minutes. We're going to start with what generational wealth really is, then we'll talk about building a strong foundation, look at ways to actually grow your family's legacy, cover how to pass it on, and, this is the big one, how to make sure that wealth actually lasts.
Okay, let's kick things off with the basics. But I want you to know this isn't just about leaving behind a pile of cash. Nope, it's about something way, way deeper. So when you boil it all down, generational wealth has 2 parts. The financial assets, things like investments, real estate, maybe a business, and the knowledge of how to manage and grow all of it. See that word? Knowledge? That is the secret ingredient, and we're going to keep coming back to it.
So why does this matter so much? Well, imagine your kid graduating college without a giant mountain of student loan debt. That right there is the power of generational wealth. It totally changes the starting line for the next generation, giving them a safety net and a serious leg up in life.
But before you can build anything, you need the right foundation. And you might think that foundation is built with money, right? Well, what if I told you it's actually built with a very specific way of thinking?
Take a look at this. It's a tale of 2 mindsets. Most of us are brought up with a consumer mindset. You work for your money, and you use that money to buy things, usually focused on right now. The big shift, the crucial one, is to an investor mindset. That's where your money starts working for you, where your income becomes a tool for long-term investing.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. We have this idea that being wealthy means spending a ton of money. But the reality is, it's often about living strategically, even frugally, because the main goal for your money is to invest it, not just spend it.
Okay, so you've got that investor mindset locked in. Now let's roll up our sleeves and get practical. How do you actually build up the assets that are going to become your family's legacy?
You've got a few proven paths here. You can invest in the stock market for that long-term compound growth, build a real estate portfolio, or maybe even create a business you can pass down. And don't sleep on things like life insurance as a safety net or developing multiple streams of income. But one of the most powerful tools, funding your kids' education.
Take a good look at this number, $37,667. Any guesses what that might represent?
Yep, that was the average student loan debt for a college grad just a couple of years ago. Think about it. By helping your children walk away from college debt-free, you're not just giving them a degree, you're giving them a decade-long financial head start. That is a huge, huge gift.
So, you've put in the work, you've built the assets. Now what? The next big challenge is making sure those assets actually get to the next generation the way you want them to. And for that, you need a plan.
I know this part can seem really intimidating, but let's just break it down into 3 key steps. First, you'll want to work with a professional to create an estate plan. Second, write a really detailed will, leave nothing up to chance. And third, this one is so simple but so often overlooked, make sure you designate your beneficiaries on all of your accounts. It can save your family a world of headache.
All right, we have arrived at what might be the single most important part of this whole conversation. Because building wealth is one thing, but making it last, that's a whole other ballgame.
90%. Just let that number hang in the air for a second. 90%. What on earth could that be?
That's it. That is the percentage of family wealth that is just gone by the time it gets to the grandkids. Get this, 70% is lost by the second generation, and a staggering 90% disappears by the third. It's a massive repeating cycle.
So this is the big question, right? If building a pile of money isn't enough to make it last, what's the missing piece of the puzzle? What is the key to finally breaking that cycle?
I love this analogy from our source material because it says everything perfectly. The money, the inheritance, that's the classic car. But the financial education, the literacy, that's knowing how to drive. And without that skill, that car is destined to crash.
So how do you teach them to drive? You start early. You teach the value of money. You model good financial habits yourself. You talk openly about family finances. You encourage them to earn, save, and invest their own money. And maybe most importantly, when they mess up with money, and they will, you treat those moments as learning opportunities, not as failures.
At the end of the day, this is the entire shift in perspective. The goal isn't to raise kids who are just consumers of an inheritance. The real goal is to raise wealth producers. People who have the skills and the mindset to take care of that legacy and even grow it.
And that brings us right here to our final thought. Maybe we've been looking at this whole thing backwards. The true lasting legacy isn't what you leave for your family, it's what you leave in them. The values, the wisdom, the knowledge. So the real question to walk away with is, what's the first lesson you're going to teach?
You know, we all dream of building something that's going to last, right? A real legacy for our kids and their kids. But what if I told you that most family fortunes, they just disappear, and way faster than they're made? Today, we're going to unpack the secrets to building wealth that actually endures for generations. You've probably heard some version of this before. This ancient proverb, it just lays it all out with some pretty brutal honesty. It perfectly captures a pattern that's so common it's almost a cliché. Hard-earned wealth just vanishing in the blink of an eye. It's this devastating cycle of boom and bust that we see play out over and over again.
I mean, just let those numbers sink in for a second. 70% of family fortunes are gone by the time the kids take over. And an absolutely staggering 90% has vanished by the time the grandkids are in charge. It's a shocking pattern. So what is really going on here? Why does this keep happening?
Well, this isn't just some random bad luck. It's actually a well-documented phenomenon that people call the 3-generation curse. And here's the thing, the problem isn't usually the money itself. It's a disconnect from the story behind the money. You know, the late nights, the tough calls, the sheer grit that went into creating that wealth in the first place. That's what gets lost in translation.
And it really makes sense when you stop and think about it. The second generation, they often grow up with a lot of comfort. And the third? Well, they often grow up in real privilege, totally detached from the sacrifices their grandparents made. They've never had to sweat every dollar. And without that context, well, the fortune gets spent, the cycle resets, and the whole struggle starts all over again.
But here is the good news. This curse, it's not inevitable. Not at all. It's really the result of a missing strategy. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. a powerful framework called the wealth cycle.
So what is the wealth cycle? Well, think of it as a proactive system for managing your finances. See, it's not just about earning money. It's a complete approach that looks at every single stage of wealth, from the very beginning of its creation all the way to its distribution. It's your strategic defense against that three-generation curse.
So what makes this approach so different? Well, a lot of traditional financial planning uses something called the life cycle method. And basically, it just groups you by your age. But that's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach, and we all know life isn't like that. The wealth cycle is much smarter. It focuses on your financial stage, which is a way more flexible and accurate way to plan for your future.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? The whole framework is built on 4 distinct pillars. Each one is designed to guide you through a different chapter of your financial story. So we start with creation, then we move to enhancement, followed by preservation, and we finish with distribution. Think of it like a journey, from planting the first seeds of your wealth to making sure that tree keeps bearing fruit for generations to come. Knowing where you are on this path is everything. Let's break each one down.
First up is wealth creation. This is your startup phase. You might be just getting started in your career, maybe you're taking on a mortgage or other debts. At this point, your liabilities might even be bigger than your income. The goal here is simple, but it is absolutely crucial. You're just trying to lay a solid financial foundation.
Next, you enter the wealth enhancement phase. Now, this is all about growth. You're probably in your peak earning years, and the goal is to make your money really start working for you. This means smart asset allocation, which is just a fancy way of saying you're diversifying your investments to get the best returns while managing your risk. This is where you really put the pedal to the metal.
Okay, pillar number 3 is wealth preservation. And honestly, this is where so many people drop the ball. This is the protection phase. Your goal shifts from aggressive growth to smart management. You're trying to provide income while cutting down on risk. And I'm telling you, neglecting this stage is exactly how fortunes are lost.
Ralph Waldo Emerson said it best. Making a fortune is one thing, but keeping it requires 10 times the skill. Preservation isn't a passive thing. It's an active, difficult, and absolutely essential discipline.
And finally, that brings us to wealth distribution. This is the legacy phase. It's all about making sure your assets, your business, everything you've poured your life into gets transferred to the next generation exactly the way you intended. And that requires careful planning with things like trusts, wills, and succession plans.
All right, so we have the 4 pillars. We've got the framework. But here's the catch. A technical framework is only half the battle. To truly make wealth last, you need something more.
This might be the most important takeaway of all. The financial framework, that's just the engine. But without the right family culture, you've got no driver. The values you teach and the habits you model, those are the hands on the steering wheel, guiding your legacy safely into the future.
So how do you build that culture? Well, it really boils down to 3 simple but incredibly powerful ideas. First, educate. Make financial literacy a topic you talk about at the dinner table. Second, be transparent. Don't make money this big, scary, taboo subject. And third, set boundaries. Your kids need to build their own success before they inherit yours. They have to feel that weight of responsibility for themselves.
Okay, let's wrap this up with some final practical rules that kind of bring all these ideas together and give you a clear path forward for actually achieving that multi-generational success.
Here are 5 powerful guidelines. First, avoid those short-term reactive decisions. And this is a big one. Never, ever use money as a weapon to control people. Use your emotional intelligence to really understand the family dynamics. You've got to plan for the worst. Death and divorce happen, so be prepared. And maybe above all else, foster honest, open communication with everyone involved.
In the end, it all comes down to careful stewardship. Generational wealth is not an accident. It's the direct result of a family giving its resources, its values, and its future the care and attention they deserve. It's like a living thing that has to be nurtured.
So, that leaves us with a question that really only you can answer. The roadmap is right here, in your hands. The choice is yours. What legacy will you choose to build?
Hey, welcome. Building a secure financial future, it can feel really complicated, right? But it absolutely doesn't have to be. Over the next few minutes, we are going to break it all down into a simple, step-by-step roadmap. It's all about how to grow and protect your money for the long haul. So let's get right into it. So let's start with a really simple question. What if all that financial noise, all that confusion, what if it just vanished? And what if you were left with just a clear, simple path to follow? Well, that's exactly the roadmap we're going to build together right now. All right, here's our game plan. Our journey is broken down into 4 essential stages. First up, we're going to master your cash flow. Then we'll get into the fun part, growing your money. After that, super important, we'll cover how to protect your assets. And finally, we'll talk about securing your legacy for the future. So let's dive right into that first step. Okay, so every single solid financial plan, no matter what, starts right here. It's all about mastering your cash flow. I mean, think about it. Before you can even dream of growing your wealth, you've got to know exactly where your money is coming from and, just as importantly, where it's all going. And this all kicks off with something that sounds super simple, but trust me, it is incredibly powerful: a budget. Now, don't think of it as a restriction. It's not about what you can't do, it's a plan for your money. You just map out all your income sources on one side and all your expenses on the other. That clarity right there, that's the very first real step toward taking control of your finances. Now, before you even think about investing a single dollar, you need a safety net. This is non-negotiable. The goal here is to save up 3 to 6 months of your essential living expenses. And you want it in an easily accessible emergency fund. This is your buffer. This is what protects your entire financial plan when life, throws those unexpected curveballs your way. All right, so once your foundation is secure, it's time for the really exciting part, putting your money to work for you. This is the moment we shift gears from just managing money to actively, intentionally growing it. To really accelerate your financial growth, you've got to play both offense and defense. So far, we've covered the defense, that's managing your expenses, but now it's time for some offense, increasing your income. I mean, could you negotiate a raise at work? Could that hobby you love become a side hustle? Unlocking new income streams is honestly one of the most powerful levers you can pull. Okay, let's talk about the main engine of wealth creation, investing. I know, it can seem super intimidating, but the core principles are actually surprisingly simple. So let's walk through the 5 key rules that are going to guide you to long-term success. Rule number 1 is maybe the most powerful of all, because it basically makes success the default option. And it's this: automate it. Just automate everything. By setting up those recurring transfers into your investment accounts, just like a 401k deduction from your paycheck, you take willpower completely out of the equation. This ensures you're investing consistently, month after month, no matter what. So, a huge part of investing is what's called your asset allocation. It's really just the mix between different types of investments. A really common starting point is a 70-30 split. So that's 70% in stocks, which are for more aggressive growth, and 30% in bonds, which give you some stability. Just think of this as your target, your ideal balance. But here's the thing. This is what happens over time. Let's say stocks have a fantastic year. Well, your portfolio can start to drift away from that target. All of a sudden, you might look and see you're at 80% stocks. And that means you've accidentally taken on way more risk than you originally planned for. And that's why having an annual review to rebalance back to your target is just so important. All right, rule number 4 deals with a silent wealth killer: fees. I'm telling you, a seemingly tiny fee of just 1% can literally eat away hundreds of thousands of dollars from your returns over a lifetime. So you've always got to look for low-cost funds. You really want to see those expense ratios under 0.5%. And honestly, even lower is better. The less you pay in fees, the more of your money stays working for you. And now for the final and maybe the hardest rule of them all: stay invested. Look, it is so tempting to panic and sell when the market drops. But remember that automated plan we set up? It means you're actually buying more shares when prices are low. You're basically buying them on sale. And that is exactly how you set yourself up for really significant gains when the market, as it always does, inevitably recovers. Okay, so you've started building some wealth. That is a huge step, seriously. But the job isn't over, not by a long shot. Now you have to protect it. It's time to build like a financial fortress around everything you've worked so hard to create. And your primary line of defense here? It's insurance. And I'm not just talking about covering your house or your car. This is way bigger. It's about having the right disability insurance to protect your income if you suddenly can't work. It's about health insurance to shield you from potentially crippling medical debt. The whole point is to make sure that one single bad event, an illness, an accident, whatever, can't come along and just wipe out everything you've built. And here we are. We've reached the final stage of this journey. This part is all about making sure your hard work benefits not just you, but your family and your community for years and years to come.
It's all about making your wealth last.
You know, when people hear the phrase estate plan, they often think it's just for the super rich, right? But it's totally not. Look, if you have any assets and people that you care about, you need one. And the foundation of it all is a will. It's just a simple document that makes sure your assets go exactly where you want them to go.
And you have to remember, an estate plan isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's a living document. I mean, as your life changes, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, your plan needs to evolve right along with you. Doing an annual review and having open communication with your family, that is absolutely key to making sure your plan still reflects exactly what you want. So there you have it. That's the complete journey. You start with a rock-solid foundation by mastering your cash flow. Then you build on top of that with the engine of growth, which is smart investing. Then you protect all of it with a fortress of insurance. And finally, you make sure it all lasts with a legacy plan. Foundation, growth, protection, legacy.
Look, all this knowledge is only powerful if you turn it into action. I know this can feel like a lot, but you absolutely do not have to do it all at once. So the most important question is the one you have to answer right now. What's the one small step you're going to take today to get started?
Hey, welcome. So today, we're going to completely redefine what it means to be wealthy. And look, forget about the mansions and the supercars for a second. True, lasting wealth is actually built on a handful of simple, powerful habits you can literally start today. So let's dive right in.
Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about what wealth really is. Then, we'll break down 4 key routines: choosing your future over the present, the power of smart investing, how to use debt wisely, and making negotiation a habit. And finally, we'll wrap up with how you can make all of this your own. All right, first up, let's get into what wealth actually is, because I'm willing to bet it's probably not what you're thinking.
I mean, when you hear the word wealthy, your mind probably jumps straight to images like these, right? The flashy cars, the designer stuff we see all over social media. But honestly, that's just a tiny and often really misleading piece of the puzzle.
So here's the big mindset shift. Real wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you consistently do. It's a series of positive financial practices. It's a mindset in action, not just a mountain of stuff.
And that leads us perfectly into our very first routine, learning to put your future self ahead of your present self. It's all about prioritizing those long-term goals.
And at its core, this comes down to one really simple thing: knowing the difference between your wants and your needs. You know, a luxury car, that's a want. Paying your mortgage, that's a need. An expensive purse is a want. Making sure you have food on the table is a need. It's all about making conscious choices that favor that long-term security over some short-term thrill.
And you got to remember, this isn't about making these massive, painful sacrifices. Not at all. It's about all the small, wise financial decisions. Think of each one like a single brick. Over time, you use them to build this incredibly solid foundation for your financial future. Okay, on to routine number 2, and this one really builds on the first. It's all about smart investing. This is where you actually learn how to make your money start working for you. So, let's imagine 2 people. They're both really disciplined, and they both put aside $3,600 every single year for 25 years. They start with the exact same habit, but what they do next changes absolutely everything. Okay, so person number 1 just saves that money. Maybe sticks it in a traditional bank account. But the second person, they invest it, earning an assumed average return of 8% a year in the stock market. And this one little difference, well, it's the whole key. And just look at the results after 25 years. The saver, they've got $90,000, which, hey, that's not bad. But the investor, they have over $284,000. That's more than 3 times as much. That is the unbelievable power of compound interest. It's not just your money making money for you, it's the money your money made making even more money.
All right, let's move on to our third routine. And I have a feeling this one might surprise you a little bit. It's about seeing debt not as a trap, but as a potential tool.
I mean, we're all kind of taught this, right? That all debt is bad, and you should avoid it at all costs. But that's a huge oversimplification. Sure, careless debt can be a massive burden, but that's not the whole story.
Let's try to look at this a little differently. Think about a student loan for medical school. Yeah, it's a ton of debt, but for someone who's going to be a surgeon, it's really an investment in a career that has massive earning potential. That's what we call good debt. You're using it to get an asset that's going to generate way more income down the road. The flip side is, high-interest credit card debt for a vacation. That's just a financial drag.
And that brings us to our fourth and final routine, building the negotiation habit. And this really comes down to one simple rule. Never, ever just take the first offer.
And look, this isn't just for big things like buying a house. It's a mindset for everything. It means shopping around for better prices instead of just buying the first thing you see. It means taking a look at your insurance plans every single year to see if you can find a better deal. It means looking into refinancing your loans when interest rates drop. Every little negotiation saves you money that you can turn around and put to work for you.
So, we've walked through 4 really powerful routines. Now, let's talk about making these habits yours, because the real magic here is in consistency and making it work for your own life. So let's lock in the key takeaways here. First, wealth is defined by your decisions, not your stuff. Second, investing is the engine that drives your growth. Third, remember that debt can actually be a strategic tool. And finally, always negotiating the terms of your financial life puts more money right back into your pocket.
Everyone's journey with money is different, right? So the real question isn't whether these habits work. We know they do. The question is, which one are you going to start with? Which of these habits are you going to start building today?
Generational wealth. It's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot. But what does it actually mean to build it? Well, it's not just for the super wealthy. In this explainer, we're going to break it all down, turn that vague buzzword into a clear, achievable blueprint for your family's future. Let's dive in. So let me just ask you this straight up. Are you working for today, or are you building for tomorrow? It is so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, right? Just focused on that next bill, that next paycheck. But creating a real legacy, that takes a different mindset. It means planning for a future that you might not even get to see. All right. First things first, you can't build something if you don't know what it is. So let's get crystal clear on what we mean by generational wealth. Because, as you can see, it is so much more than just a pile of cash.
Okay, so here's the textbook definition. It's any asset with monetary value that gets passed down. But honestly, the real power isn't the money itself. It's the opportunities and the choices that money creates. It's giving the next generation the freedom to chase their dreams, not just a job to survive.
And this is a really critical distinction to make. On one hand, you've got tangible wealth. That's the stuff you can touch, the money, the property, the businesses. But on the other side, you have intangible wealth. This is the how and the why, the financial know-how, the values, the skills you pass down. And here's the kicker. Without that intangible knowledge, the tangible stuff, it tends to vanish, often in just one generation. We've all heard the stories of the lottery winner who's broke a year later. They got the money, but they didn't have the mindset to keep it. So, if that intangible wealth is the real key, how do you get it? Well, it all starts inside, with a wealthy mindset. It's like building a house. You have to pour a solid foundation before you can put up the walls. This section is all about getting that internal foundation right.
The source material really drills down on 5 skills you need in your toolkit. You've got to know how to market yourself, how to negotiate for what you're worth. You have to be comfortable with digital tools. It's the 21st century. You need to be able to make a plan, and this is the big one, actually follow through. And underpinning all of it is something we can all master, just basic financial math.
And this quote, this just nails it. So many of our worst financial decisions come from emotion, right? Fear, greed, trying to keep up with the Joneses. A wealthy mindset hits pause. It takes out a calculator and does the simple math. It's about letting logic drive the bus, not your feelings.
Okay, once that internal foundation is rock solid, we can start building the external structure. These are the 5 pillars that will hold up your entire financial house. And here they are. You'll notice they're all given equal weight, and that's intentional. A balanced, diverse strategy is absolutely key. It all starts with financial literacy. That's the knowledge you need to handle the other 4. Then you've got your growth engines, the stock market and real estate. Then the fuel for those engines, your own business and savings. And finally, the safety net that protects the whole thing, life insurance. So how do you actually build these pillars in the real world? Look, it's not about becoming an expert overnight. It's about starting small and just being consistent. First, educate yourself. Then start investing steadily, even if it's a tiny amount, into a 401k. Save your money like you mean it, so you have the freedom to take a calculated risk later. And please, put that protection in place. Every small step makes each pillar stronger over time. So we have the mindset, we have the strategies, but what's the secret sauce that separates the people who succeed from those who just talk about it? It almost always comes down to the small things they do every single day, their habits.
Okay, this next number is a total game changer. Research shows that the typical millionaire doesn't just have one source of income. They have, on average, 7. Let that sink in. Not 1, not 2, but 7. That should completely change how you think about earning money.
And here's what that might actually look like. Now, before you panic, this is not about working 7 jobs. It's about creating a mix of active income, what you work for, and passive income, what works for you. Your job is number 1. Then you might get dividends from your 401k. Maybe you start a small side business. And as you see here, real estate can eventually give you multiple streams of rental income. This creates a powerful safety net. If one stream slows down, the others are there to catch you. That is real financial security.
And this right here, this is the golden rule of building wealth. It really isn't about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. Wealthy families have this habit baked into their DNA. By living well below their means, they create a gap, a surplus. And that surplus is the magic ingredient. That's the money that gets invested, that gets put to work, and that ultimately builds their future.
So all of this, the mindset, the pillars, the habits, it all leads to this one ultimate goal. This isn't just about collecting money for the sake of it. It's about building something meaningful, something that will last long after you're gone. It's about your legacy. I absolutely love this quote. It just reframes the entire conversation, doesn't it? Your legacy is the total sum of your life's work. Yes, your financial success, but also the family you raised, the values you shared, and the impact you had on the world around you. Think of it like 2 sides of the same coin. On the left, you've got the financial mechanics, the will, the insurance, the retirement fund, the practical stuff. But on the right, you have the heart of it all, your personal legacy, building a strong family, teaching your kids to be resourceful, serving your community. You really can't have one without the other. They are completely connected. And this timeline just shows you how it all connects. The little things you do today, the habits you start, the plan you make, those are like planting seeds. Those seeds grow into trees that provide opportunity and a safety net for your children in the future. And those opportunities, shaped by the values you taught them, well, that creates a legacy that can last for generations. So we end right back where we started, with a question for you. Everything we've talked about today is a blueprint. But you know, a blueprint is just a piece of paper until someone picks up a hammer and starts building. Your legacy won't be defined by your good intentions. It'll be defined by your actions. So the only question left is, how will you be remembered? You know, when you hear the term generational wealth, it's so easy to picture like old money, sprawling family estates, right? But what if it's not some far-off dream? What if it's actually something way more attainable, something you could start building like today? Well, let's dive right into that. We're going to map out a real blueprint for your family's financial future. So, here's the big question, right? The one that probably makes you think, nah, this isn't for me. So many of us believe that building a real financial legacy, that's a game for, the super rich, the 1%. But what if that idea is just completely wrong? Let's find out. And boom, there's the answer. This one sentence just flips the whole script. It's not about how much you start with, it's about a simple formula. The money you make minus the money you spend. That gap, even if it's small, that is the seed. That's where it all begins. Okay, so if it isn't just about getting lucky, what exactly are we talking about here? Well, try to think of it less like a static pile of cash and more like a financial engine. Yeah, an engine that you build, a system that's designed to keep generating value long after you're gone. And just like any engine, you gotta have a blueprint to build it right. And this is how that engine really works. It's a cycle. One generation, maybe that's you, creates or buys some assets. Then the next generation gets them. And here's the key. Their job isn't just to hang on to them. Nope. Their job is to grow them. When that happens, generation after generation, the wealth doesn't just get passed down. It compounds. It gets bigger and bigger.
All right, to make this whole thing super clear, let's use a really simple but honestly pretty powerful analogy. We're going to talk about an apple orchard. It's a great way to see how tiny little actions, when you repeat them and build on them over time, can turn into something absolutely massive.
Okay, so let's walk through this step by step. Picture this. Generation 1 starts with just a single seed. That's it, a tiny, manageable first step.
Now, Generation 2 comes along. They don't just eat all the apples. No way. They're smart. They sell some of the apples to buy more seeds, making the orchard bigger. Then Generation 3. This is where they really level up. They have so many apples now, they're not just buying more seeds, they're buying better, high-yield trees, the good stuff. And by the time Generation 4 is on the scene, that one little seed has turned into an entire dynasty, a valuable, income-producing orchard, all because every single generation protected and grew what they were given.
So that orchard, that's the goal, right? But think about it. Any valuable orchard needs a fence. You gotta protect it. And that brings us perfectly to our first big strategy, building a financial fortress. See, once you start getting some assets together, the very next step, and it's a crucial one, is to protect them. And that, my friends, is where trust comes in.
I know, the word trust can sound kind of scary and complicated. But honestly, the idea behind it is pretty simple. It's just a legal container, like a box, that holds your assets. You pick someone you trust, they're called the trustee, to manage everything in the box for the people you care about, your beneficiaries. And here's the best part. It's all done according to your rules. You call the shots.
And the benefits? Oh, they are huge. Seriously. First off, a trust helps your family skip probate court. And trust me, you want to skip that. It's a long, expensive, and super public process that can be a real headache. A trust keeps everything private and way more efficient. Plus, it can give you some major tax advantages, basically acting like a firewall to stop estate taxes from eating away at your assets. But you know what the real power is? It's control. You get to decide exactly how and when your money is given out, making sure it's used wisely and protected for the people it's meant for.
Okay, so we've got our fortress. That's the trust. But a fortress is just one piece of the puzzle, right? It's part of a whole kingdom. So our second strategy is about creating the blueprint for that entire kingdom. We're talking about comprehensive legacy planning.
And this Warren Buffett quote, it just hits the nail on the head here. Building this kind of wealth isn't just about picking the right stocks or funds. It's about building strong financial habits and systems inside your family. Legacy planning is how you take those good habits and lock them in so they last for generations to come.
And this is a really important distinction to make. Look, having a will is a good thing. It's definitely a piece of the puzzle. But legacy planning, that's the whole dang puzzle box. It's a massive strategy that asks the really big questions. Like, how do we protect our stuff from a market crash or a lawsuit? How do we set up our investments so they grow for the long haul and don't get hammered by taxes? And maybe most important of all, how do we teach the next generation to be smart with this wealth so they don't just blow through it? See? It's about building a whole system that lasts, not just signing one piece of paper.
Look, our time here is, well, it's limited. But the legacy you build, that can be designed to last, well, pretty much forever. The whole point of all of this, the whole goal, is to create something that takes care of your kids, and their kids, and even their kids. It's really the ultimate gift you can give.
All right, let's wrap this up and recap the key parts of this blueprint. First, remember, you can start this journey. If you spend less than you make, you're in the game. Second, a real legacy plan is so much more than just a will. Third, trusts are your financial fortress. They give you protection and control. Fourth, the big picture goal is to create assets that outlive you and your grandkids. And finally, and this is a big one, none of this works if you don't teach the next generation how to handle it. You got to bring them into the fold.
So we're ending right back where we started, with that simple, powerful idea of the apple orchard. Every single great financial legacy in history started the same way, by planting one single seed. So the only question left to ask is, what's the first seed you're going to plant?
You know, thinking about your family's financial future, it's a huge deal, right? And building something that lasts for generations, man, that can feel super complicated. But here's the thing, it's not some mystery. There's actually a science to it. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today. The real, actionable steps you can take to build a legacy that actually lasts. Okay, let's just dive right in with a pretty intense question, but it's an important one. If you knew this was your last year, right now, would you be happy with what you're leaving for your children? Whoa, I mean, that question really cuts right to the core of why this conversation is so important. So before we even get into the how-to, we've got to get on the same page about what wealth really means. And I'm telling you, the real definition, it might not be what you think. It's definitely not just about having a lot of money. All right, check this out. It's so easy to get these two mixed up. Income, that's the paycheck, right? It's the money coming in regularly. But wealth is completely different. Think of it this way. Wealth is measured in time. How long could you live your life exactly as you are now if that paycheck just stopped? That number, that amount of time, that's your real wealth. It's the ultimate measure of financial freedom. Here's a perfect example. Picture your favorite pro athlete, right? They're making, say, $10 million a year. Huge income. But if they're spending all of it on the giant mansion, the fleet of sports cars, well, they're not actually wealthy. See, they have to keep making that insane income just to keep the lights on in that lifestyle. Their financial engine is redlining, and if it ever sputters, the whole thing grinds to a halt. Okay, so if wealth is all about time, then it makes sense that time is our single most powerful tool for building it, right? It's like the secret ingredient. When you mix time with the right financial moves, it creates this unstoppable engine for building a real, lasting legacy.
And a huge reason for this is that silent wealth killer, inflation. You know what I'm talking about. Every single year, the dollar in your pocket buys a little bit less than it did the year before. It's a slow leak. And that's exactly why just stuffing cash under the mattress is a losing game long term. You have to invest it. You have to put your money to work so it can outrun inflation and actually grow.
Want to see just how mind-blowingly powerful this is in action? Let's jump in a time machine and look at an amazing story from history. It all starts with this number, $2,000. That's what Benjamin Franklin left in his will way back in 1790. But here's where it gets really cool. Franklin added a catch. He gave the money to Boston and Philadelphia, but he said they couldn't touch the full amount for, get this, 200 years. He basically set up a 200-year-long financial experiment. So the big question is, what do you think happened to that little pile of cash over 2 whole centuries? Are you ready for this? After 200 years of just sitting there compounding and growing, that initial $2,000 turned into $6.5 million. Let that sink in. From 2,000 to $6.5 million. That is the insane, explosive power of letting time and investment do their thing. Okay, that's an awesome story, but how do we do that? How do we apply these ideas in our own lives? Well, lucky for us, the source material lays out a really clear blueprint, and it's super easy to remember with this acronym, LEGACY. Let's run through this real quick. L is for loans, but we're talking about good debt, like a mortgage to buy a house that grows in value. E and G are for endow and give, using your wealth for causes you believe in, which connects it to your values. A is for affirming decisions. This is the simple, smart stuff, like always getting your full 401k match from your employer. It's free money. C is for capping expenses, basically watching your spending so you're actually keeping more of what you make. And finally, Y is for yardstick. This is about being smart and strategic with how and when you distribute your money. You put it all together and it's a complete game plan for building and protecting your legacy. All right, so we've talked about what to do, but just as important, maybe even more important, is knowing what to avoid. Think of these as the 3 big legacy killers that can totally sabotage your plans if you're not paying attention. First up, there's probate. That's the legal mess that can happen after someone passes away. It can be super expensive and drag on forever. Second, you've got estate taxes. Depending on the size of your estate, these can take a massive chunk out of it. And third, and this one is the real heartbreaker, is just simple misunderstandings. When things aren't clear, it can cause so much conflict and confusion. But here's the good news. All 3 of these are manageable. With some smart planning, like setting up a trust or just talking openly with your family, you can dodge these bullets. And you know, this really brings us to maybe the most profound idea in all of this. Because building a real legacy, it's so much more than just the numbers in a bank account. True, lasting generational wealth is about building a culture within your family, a culture of shared values, open communication, and trust. And get this might be the biggest shocker of the whole explainer. The number one reason that family wealth disappears after a generation or two, it's not bad investments, it's not a market crash, it's a breakdown in the family itself. It's a lack of trust, poor communication, and not preparing the next generation for what's coming. So how do you stop that from happening to your family? The sources give us 3 really powerful guidelines. First, plan together. Make it a team sport. Get your family and your advisors in the same room talking about the same goals. Second, create a positive culture on purpose. Talk about your family values, what you stand for. And third, teach the younger generation. Don't just hand them money. Teach them how to save, how to invest, and most importantly, the purpose behind the wealth. Look, at the end of the day, a legacy isn't something you just stumble into. It's built one intentional decision at a time, starting right now. It's about figuring out what truly matters to you and then making a plan to protect it. So I'll leave you with this final thought. What's the very first step you're going to take to start building your family's legacy?
All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about one of the most important life skills you can possibly give a child, something that will literally shape their future, understanding money. It's a journey, you know? It can start with a little piggy bank and end with a full-blown retirement plan. So how do we actually get it right? Let's break it all down.
So let me ask you a question, and be honest. Do you wish you'd learned about money sooner? If you're like most of us, the answer is a big, loud yes. It's actually one of the most common regrets people have, not getting a handle on this stuff earlier. A lot of us had to learn by trial and error, and let's face it, that can be a really expensive way to get an education. Now look at this number, 23. It might not seem like much, but it's pretty revealing. As of 2022, that's how many states require high school students to take a personal finance course to graduate. That means in more than half the country, this absolutely critical education just isn't happening in schools, and that puts the responsibility right back on us.
And that's where this quote from certified financial planner Chris Kawashima really hits home. It's up to us, the parents, the guardians, the mentors. This isn't just about teaching kids how to avoid debt or big mistakes. It's about giving them the tools and the confidence they need to go out and build a life where they can truly thrive.
So where does this whole journey kick off? Well, it starts young. We're talking grade school, when the ideas are simple and habits are just starting to take root. This is all about laying that solid foundation, one little brick at a time.
You know, this insight is just so powerful. Think about it. When money is just this abstract thing you ask for, it doesn't feel real. But the second it becomes their money, money they actually earned, the whole game changes. Suddenly buying something isn't just a request, it's a choice with a real trade-off.
For this age group, you can really boil it all down to 3 simple steps. First up, earn. Tying an allowance to chores teaches a lesson that lasts a lifetime. Money comes from work. Step 2, save. Make this a non-negotiable rule. A slice of every single dollar that comes in, say 10%, gets put away. And third, introduce investing. You can open what's called a custodial account, which is basically just an investment account for a kid that an adult manages, and let them pick a stock in a company they already know and love. It's an amazing way to teach them about ownership and see how money can actually make more money.
And that save step, it's so critical because it teaches one of the most important skills for a successful life, financial or otherwise, delayed gratification. By helping a kid save up for that bigger toy they really want, you're not just teaching them about money. You're literally training their brain to value long-term goals over those short-term impulses. That's huge.
Okay, so what happens when we move into the teen years? Well, the piggy bank gets swapped for a real bank account. The ideas get a bit more complicated, and yeah, the stakes definitely get higher. But you know what? So do the opportunities for learning.
For this age group, this quote is the name of the game. The world of credit cards and loans is suddenly right there, and if they don't understand it, it can lead to some serious trouble down the road. The goal here isn't to scare them off credit, not at all. It's to empower them to understand it, respect it, and use it as a tool.
It all starts with the absolute basics. What's the real difference between a debit and a credit card? It's simple, right? A debit card uses your money. A credit card uses the bank's money, which you have to pay back, with interest. A fantastic way to teach this is to add them as an authorized user on your card, but with one rule. They have to pay you back for every single thing they buy. They learn how to manage it before they ever get a card of their own.
As their world expands, it is prime time to introduce budgeting. Now, the source material had this brilliant little analogy called the potatoes and gravy game. Potatoes are your needs, the stuff you absolutely must have to live. Gravy is your wants, all the fun stuff that makes life a little tastier but isn't essential. Helping a teen learn to always cover their potatoes before they even think about the gravy, that's a lesson that will serve them for their entire life.
Okay, now if your teen has a part-time job, mowing lawns, working at the local pizza place, whatever, you can introduce them to one of the most powerful wealth-building tools that exists. It's called a Roth IRA. In simple terms, it's a special retirement account they can put money into after they've already paid taxes on it.
And this right here is where it gets mind-blowingly cool. By starting a Roth IRA as a teenager, they pay taxes on that money now, while their income and their tax rate is super low. Then, that money gets to grow for 40, 50, maybe even 60 years. And when they take it out in retirement,
All of that growth, all those earnings can be completely tax-free. It is an unbelievable, incredible head start on their future.
And that, of course, brings us to our final stage, launching into the real world. That first real job after school is such a huge moment, and it comes with a whole new universe of financial decisions, responsibilities, and some pretty amazing opportunities.
This quote just perfectly captures that reality check so many young adults face. I mean, when you've never had to pay an electric bill or buy a whole week's worth of food, it's so easy to look at that first salary and think you're rich. But the reality of all those monthly costs can be a real shock to the system.
And that is exactly why sitting down with them and mapping out their very first budget is one of the best things you can do. Help them think through every single category, from the big stuff like rent and student loans, all the way down to savings and, yes, some fun money. You're not doing it for them, you're just giving them the roadmap to do it for themselves for the rest of their lives. Now, when you're looking over their new job benefits, there is one thing that you have to stress, and I mean really stress: the employer 401k match. If their company offers to match their contributions up to, say, 3 or 4%, they have to contribute at least that much. Because not doing it, it's literally saying no thanks to a 100% return on your money. It is free cash on the table. Period. And as they start investing, you have to share this piece of timeless wisdom with them. Because here's the secret: their single greatest asset as a young investor isn't their money, it's their time. They don't have to be a stock-picking genius, they just need to be consistent. I mean, think about it. Someone who starts investing just a few $100 a month in their early 20s versus someone who starts in their 30s can end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars more by retirement. That is the incredible power of time.
And that kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? Because this whole thing isn't a one-and-done conversation. It's an ongoing dialogue that changes as your child grows. Your role eventually shifts from being the manager of their money to being their most trusted mentor.
So what does that look like? Well, you lead by example with your own habits. You show them that you're not afraid to ask for help when you need it. You reassure them that they are not on this journey alone. And you let them know that even financial experts get support from other experts. No one has to figure this all out by themselves.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Teaching your kids about money, it's about so much more than just dollars and cents. It's about building a legacy of confidence, of responsibility, and of freedom. It's about giving them the tools they need, not just to survive out there, but to truly, truly thrive. So, what financial legacy will you build for them? When you hear the words family legacy, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's all about money, right? Property, assets. But what if the most valuable thing you could ever pass down isn't something you can put a price on at all? Today, we're going to dive into how to build a legacy that actually, truly lasts for generations.
Okay, look at this number: $30 trillion. No, that's not a typo. That is the absolutely mind-blowing amount of wealth that's set to be passed down over the next couple of decades. We are smack in the middle of one of the biggest wealth transfers in all of human history.
And yet, here's the crazy part. A huge chunk of that fortune is just going to disappear, often in just a single generation. So what's going on? Well, it's not bad investments or a shaky economy. The real problem is actually a lot closer to home. The heirs, the people receiving the money, are often just completely unprepared for it.
So, if the problem isn't just about the cash, what's the answer? Well, this is where we need to totally shift how we think about this. To make a legacy stick, we've got to focus on something much deeper. Let's call it the emotional inheritance.
So what in the world is an emotional inheritance? You know, it's all the invisible stuff. It's the values you live your life by, the passions that get you out of bed in the morning, the core beliefs you pass down to your kids. It's the foundation, the bedrock that makes any financial legacy actually mean something.
Here's a really simple way to think about it. A financial legacy is what you leave to your family, but an emotional legacy, that's what you leave in them. See the difference? One is about your assets, the other is about their character. And honestly, having one without the other is a complete recipe for disaster. Okay, so this all sounds good, but how do we actually do it? This isn't just some vague idea. There's a real, practical, 4-step blueprint that pretty much any family can start using to build a legacy that brings together both wealth and wisdom.
So here's the roadmap. First up, teaching your kids about money from a really young age. Second, you've got to get super intentional about defining what your family's core values even are. Third, you put those values into action by giving back. And finally, number 4, you start acting like a high-performing team. Let's break each of these down.
It all starts with teaching financial literacy. And I mean, you've got to start early. A super effective way to do this is the 4 buckets method. Any money a kid gets, allowance, birthday money, whatever, it gets split 4 ways. Some to spend now, some to save for something bigger, some to invest for the long haul, and some to give away. You're teaching them priorities and responsibility right from day one.
Next, your family needs a shared compass. A legacy that lasts isn't built on guesswork. It's built on everyone being on the same page about what your family stands for. We're talking about big, universal ideas here. Things like honesty, responsibility, humility. Just the act of writing these down creates this powerful guide for every big decision the family has to make down the road.
But look, values stuck on a piece of paper, they're just words. So how do you make them real? How do you bring them to life? Well, that leads us to one of the most powerful tools out there for building that emotional legacy, philanthropy. When you give together as a family, a few pretty incredible things happen. For one, it's like a training ground for the next generation of leaders. It also teaches this crucial lesson that wealth isn't just for you, it comes with a social responsibility. And maybe most importantly, it opens the door to amazing conversations about what really matters. And this can be super practical, using things like a family foundation or a donor-advised fund to make giving a real, shared experience. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The family members are the most valuable resource when creating a family legacy plan. At the end of the day, the money, the assets, they're just tools. The real power, the true engine of a legacy that lasts, is the people. And that brings us to our final step. The last piece of the puzzle is to change your mindset and start operating like a high-performing team. What does that actually mean? It means you're actively showing appreciation for each other. It means working on your emotional intelligence, being sincere, and holding each other accountable. It means when problems come up, you get curious instead of defensive. A family that works this way isn't just ready to manage wealth, they're ready for pretty much anything life throws at them.
So, as we start to pull all these threads together, the message becomes crystal clear. Building a family legacy that lasts isn't something that just starts when you write a will. It's a process, and it starts right now, with the conversations you're having and the choices you make today.
So yeah, that $30 trillion number grabs all the headlines. But the real takeaway here is this. The most important thing you could ever pass on isn't financial. It's the wisdom, the character, and the values you build in your family. That's the one inheritance that will never, ever fade away. In fact, it's the only one that's guaranteed to grow.
So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. If you could pick just one single value to define your family's future for generations to come, what would it be? Because that is where your true legacy begins.
So what happens to my money when I'm gone? It's a question we all kind of push to the back of our minds. But estate planning, it's not as complicated as it sounds. And honestly, it's one of the most important things we can do for the people we love. We're going to break it down into 6 simple stages, so let's get into it.
Really think about this for a second. If you don't decide what happens to your stuff, who will? Well, the answer is the courts. And trust me, that can turn into a long, expensive, and messy process called probate. This isn't just for millionaires either. It's for anyone who wants to be in the driver's seat of their own legacy, big or small. Okay, let's just be honest here. This stuff is, well, it's hard. As Tyler DeHaan, who's a director over at Principal, puts it, you're effectively planning for death. And yeah, that is not an easy thing to think about, let alone talk about. No way around it.
But, and this is a big but, it's also how you take control. Seriously, making a plan isn't just some morbid exercise. It's you, right now, making sure your wishes are followed and the people you love are taken care of. It's really an act of power and an act of love.
All right, so let's dive into the basics. Why do you even need a plan? And what's the difference between a simple will and this whole estate plan thing anyway?
Okay, this is a super important distinction. A will, that's all about who gets your stuff, your house, your car, your savings, after you're gone. But an estate plan, that's the whole shebang. It also decides who's in charge of your finances and healthcare if you're still alive but can't make those decisions for yourself. So you see, a will is part of it, but the full plan is a plan for life, not just for after you're gone.
So, where do you even begin with all this? Before you touch a single legal document, before you even think about lawyers or anything, you have to answer one single guiding question. You've got to figure out your why.
And this is it.
Where will my money and possessions go after I pass away? That's the heart of the matter. The whole entire process really just comes down to answering this one simple question. Once you know the answer to this, everything else starts to fall into place.
And for most of us, the answers are pretty similar, right? Maybe your number one goal is making sure your spouse or kids are set up for the future. Or hey, maybe you dream of helping your grandkids with college. Or maybe you want to leave something behind for a charity that's close to your heart. Whatever it is for you, figuring that out, that's your foundation. That's step one.
Okay, so once you know what you want to do, we can talk about how you're going to do it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the core legal documents you'll use, like wills, beneficiaries, and trusts.
All right, I'm going to let you in on maybe the single most important and overlooked step in this whole process. It's super simple, and you need to do it before you even think about writing a will. And that is verify your beneficiary designations.
So what am I talking about here? Well, go pull up your retirement accounts, your 401k, your IRA, look at your life insurance policies, check your investment accounts, even your regular old savings accounts. Even the title on your house. On all of these, you can name a beneficiary, and that creates a direct pipeline for that money to go to that person.
Now listen up, because this is huge, and I mean absolutely critical. The person you name as the beneficiary on, say, your life insurance policy, that designation overrides your will. Let me say that again. It trumps your will. So if your will says your kids get everything, but your ex-spouse is still listed as the beneficiary on your retirement account, guess who's getting that money? Yep, your ex. It's a direct contract with the bank, and it completely bypasses the will. You cannot afford to get this wrong. Okay, now that we've covered that crucial point, let's talk about the will itself. Think of this as the foundation of your entire plan. It's the official document where you lay out your instructions. And a will does some really specific, really important things. First, it names your executor. That's the person you trust to make sure everything gets done. It also handles all your personal stuff, things that don't have a beneficiary form, like jewelry, cars, or family heirlooms. And for anyone with young kids, this is huge. Your will is where you name a guardian for them. That alone is a reason to have one.
All right, let's talk about another one of those words that can sound kind of intimidating, a trust. But really, the idea behind it is pretty straightforward. A trust is just a formal agreement that gives you way more control over your property, not just after you pass away, but even while you're still here.
So what's the real difference between a will and a trust? Well, think of it like this. A will is kind of like handing someone a lump sum of cash all at once. Boom, it's theirs. A trust, on the other hand, lets you create a payment plan. You can set up rules. For example, maybe you don't want your 18-year-old to get a huge inheritance all at once. With a trust, you could say they get a third when they turn 25, another third at 30, and the rest at 35. See? It gives you a ton more control.
All right, so your plan is coming together. You've thought about your priorities, your beneficiaries, your will, maybe even a trust, but you're not done yet. This isn't something you just do once and then stick in a drawer. It's a living thing, and it can also be a great way to be generous.
So if leaving something to charity is important to you, you've got a few different ways to do it. You could just include a donation right in your will, or, remember those beneficiaries we talked about? You can name a charity as the beneficiary of an account. For bigger donations, you could even set up something called a charity trust, or use a donor-advised fund. Lots of options.
And this brings us back to that idea of a living document. Here's another great piece of advice from Tyler DeHaan. Don't just set up your estate plan and leave it at that. Life happens, right? You get married, have kids, get divorced, your financial situation changes. All that stuff means you need to pull out your plan every few years and make sure it still makes sense.
Okay, let's wrap this up and put it all together. I know we've gone through a lot, but it really boils down to a pretty clear step-by-step game plan.
So here's your action plan, your checklist. Number 1, figure out your wishes. What's most important to you? 2, go verify all those beneficiaries. Seriously, do it today. 3, get your will created. That's your foundation. 4, think about whether a trust makes sense for your situation. And 5, set a reminder on your calendar to review everything every few years. That's it. And at the end of the day, remember what this is all about. It's not really about the money or the legal documents. It's about giving your family peace of mind. It's about preventing arguments and confusion when they're already going through a tough time. Honestly, a good plan is one of the greatest gifts you can leave behind. Because really, that's what your plan is. It's your voice, speaking for you when you can't. It makes sure your values and your wishes are the last word. So the only question left is, what do you want your voice to say?
You've probably heard that old saying, right? From shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. It's a pretty wild story that we see play out all the time. One generation builds a massive fortune, but by the time their grandkids are in charge, poof, it's gone. So why does this keep happening? And more importantly, how can it be stopped? Let's get into it. Okay, get ready for this because the numbers are just staggering. Research from the Williams Group found that over 90%, 90 of all family wealth is completely gone by the 3rd generation. Think about that. That means for every 10 families that build something incredible, 9 of their great-grandkids will end up right back where the founders started. It's a pattern you see everywhere, across every culture and every economy. And this all comes back to that phrase, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. You know, the first generation, they're in their work shirts, their sleeves rolled up, building something from nothing. The second generation, they're born into comfort, but they still saw the struggle, so they might build on it. But by the time you get to the third generation, well, that connection to the hard work, the sacrifice, it's just gone. And usually the fortune goes with it.
So if this cycle is so common, so predictable, you have to ask, what about that other 10%? How in the world do they break the curse? What do they know that everyone else doesn't? That right there is a secret we're going to unpack today.
To really understand how to succeed, first, we've got to look at why most families fail. And here's the thing you need to know. It's almost never about a bad stock pick or a market crash. No, the real reasons are way more personal, way more human. You're not going to find them on a spreadsheet. You're going to find them around the family dinner table.
What it really boils down to is a massive shift in perspective. The first generation, they remember the struggle. It's in their bones. The second generation, they saw it up close. But the third generation, they've often only known a life of plenty. They never saw the sacrifice, so their whole understanding of what it takes to even have that money, let alone preserve it, is completely different.
And look, this failure isn't just one single event. It's more like a series of dominoes. The first domino to fall, the number one culprit, a total breakdown in communication. And from there, it just cascades. You get unprepared heirs who have zero financial literacy. Then you throw in some old family drama that's never been resolved, and the fact that nobody agrees on what the money is even for. And yeah, you've got the perfect recipe for disaster. But what's so fascinating is why the communication fails. This quote from financial advisor Emily Green just nails it. A lot of wealthy parents are terrified that if they talk about money, their kids will get lazy or entitled. So in an effort to protect them and keep them grounded, they just say nothing. It's a total paradox, right? The very thing they do to raise good kids creates this vacuum of knowledge that pretty much guarantees the exact opposite happens. And the result of all that silence? It's as predictable as it is devastating. The next generation suddenly gets this huge fortune, maybe when they're 30, 40, or even 50 years old, and they don't know the first thing about managing it. I mean, they might not even know the difference between a stock and a bond. And now they're supposed to run this massive, complex portfolio? It's an impossible situation, and it leads straight to financial ruin and a ton of personal stress. All right, so that's the pretty grim picture for the 90%. But now, let's flip the script. Let's talk about the 10% who actually get it right. And spoiler alert, it's not luck. They're incredibly intentional, and they have a plan. Here it is. This is the absolute key. The families that make their wealth last for generations do one thing fundamentally differently. They treat their family legacy with the exact same strategic seriousness they use to run their businesses. They take all those principles that lead to success in the boardroom and apply them to the living room. And this whole approach can actually be broken down into a pretty simple 3-part blueprint. It's about defining your purpose, that's the why, then building your strategy, the how, and maybe most importantly, developing your people, the who. Let's take a look at each one. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with the why. What is all this money actually for? The families who succeed, they answer that question together. They create a shared purpose, like a family mission statement, that gives the money a meaning that goes way beyond just buying stuff. It's the glue that holds everything and everyone together. And this isn't some vague, fluffy idea. Here's a real-world example of a family's purpose. You see how it's not just about getting richer? It's about using their fortune to be a force for good. When you have a mission that's that clear and compelling, it gives everyone a reason to want to protect the legacy. So, once you've got your why, you need your how. This is your strategy, your game plan, complete with a timeline.
Just like a business has a 5-year plan, these families map out short, medium, and long-term goals for their wealth, their companies, and their charity. And the best part? They get every generation involved in building it. Now, what's really important to get here is that there's no single one-size-fits-all strategy. Just look at these two examples. One European family built a whole system where you have to earn your way into the family business. Meanwhile, an Asian family who was worried about conflict created a strategy that banned any family members from having executive roles. Both strategies work because they were custom-built to serve that family's unique purpose. And that brings us to the final and honestly the most critical step, the who. You can have the best purpose and the most brilliant strategy in the world, but they are totally useless if you don't have the right people to make it all happen. This is all about investing in your human capital. The successful families don't just hope their kids figure it out. They create actual development programs for the next generation. They focus on 5 key pillars: making sure they have real financial literacy, that they understand governance, that they develop leadership skills, that they keep their entrepreneurial spirit alive, and that they feel personally empowered. So when you put all these pieces together, the path to building a truly lasting legacy starts to look a lot clearer. It's really about shifting your whole focus from what you have as a family to who you are as a family. And if you take away only one thing from all this, let it be this: human capital is the single most important factor, period. The money, the stocks, the real estate, that's all just a bunch of tools. The real legacy, the asset that actually lasts through generations, is a family of capable, educated, and aligned people. They're the ones who will carry the purpose forward long after you're gone. Which leaves us with one final and pretty powerful question. It's not really about how much money you'll leave behind, but about the values, the skills, and the purpose you pass down to the next generation. So whether you've got a fortune or not, it's worth asking yourself, what is the true legacy you want to leave behind? You know, we all have this dream, right? To build a life of financial security, kind of like a personal fortress that protects us and lets our wealth grow. On paper, it sounds pretty straightforward. Save your money, invest it, and just be patient. But if it's really that simple, why isn't everyone wealthy? Let's dig into what's really holding us back. So what is it? What's the holdup? We've got the desire, we pretty much know the rules, but for so many of us, it's still a struggle. What are these invisible walls we keep running into? Well, here's the thing. It's usually not one giant monster blocking our path. Nope, it's more like death by 1,000 cuts, a whole series of small, sneaky habits. These are the wealth killers that quietly wreck our plans. So today, we're going to drag them out into the light and unmask them, one by one. First things first. Before you can build anything that lasts, you need a solid foundation. And when it comes to money, that foundation is all in your head. It's your mindset. Get that wrong, and I promise you, everything you try to build on top of it will eventually just fall apart. So in this first part, we're going to fortify that foundation by going after 3 saboteurs that attack your thinking: a lack of basic financial know-how, a negative attitude, and of course, the siren song of get-rich-quick schemes. Let's be real. We live in the age of the internet. Pretty much all the information you could ever need about personal finance is right there at your fingertips. So at this point, choosing to stay in the dark about the basics, well, that's the first wealth killer you have to defeat. And then there's this. This slide really just nails it. Your attitude, it controls everything, from how you react in a crisis to how you view your credit card statement. A wealthy mindset sees debt for what it is, nasty and disgusting, and it always puts saving before spending. Which brings us right to wealth killer number 3, those get-rich-quick schemes. You know the ones. They promise you the moon, but they usually just end up draining your bank account. Real wealth, the kind that lasts, is built slowly and patiently. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? The basics might feel boring, but you know what? They actually work. Okay, so a strong fortress isn't just about the foundation. It also needs a good shield, right? Something to protect it from unexpected attacks. In the world of finance, that shield is all about your protections. So, let's build up your defenses. We're going to tackle 3 massive vulnerabilities: having 0 emergency savings, rolling the dice with no health insurance, and having no disability coverage. Look, life is going to happen. Your car will break down, your pet will get sick, things come up. The solution is a simple 2-step emergency fund. Your first mission, save $1,000. Get that starter fund in place. Then from there, you build it up until you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses covered. Seriously, this is non-negotiable. Yes, this one. The logic here is so flawed. People think, hey, I'm healthy. I don't need to waste money on insurance. But that's the whole point. You can only get good insurance when you're healthy. It's for the unexpected disaster you don't see coming. Waiting until you're sick is just way too late. And that flows directly into disability coverage. This quote, wow. It's blunt, but it is 100% true. Nothing will demolish your financial dreams faster than an illness or an injury that stops you from working. Your ability to earn an income is your single greatest asset. Disability insurance is the shield that protects that asset. All right, your foundation is solid, your shields are up. But now we have to ask a tough question. Who are you letting inside your fortress? Your social circle, the people around you, they act as the gatekeepers, and they can either make your defenses stronger or leave the gates wide open for an attack. So let's talk about two of the biggest relationship-based wealth killers, the friends you keep, and of course, the partner you choose. You know, your friends have such a huge impact on your habits, whether you realize it or not. If your circle is full of people who are constantly complaining or always pushing you to spend money you don't have, they're draining a lot more than just your wallet. They're draining your spirit. It is absolutely okay to let go of those relationships. And this, of course, extends to our most important relationships. A partner who isn't on the same page financially, who undermines your goals, that can lead straight to bankruptcy and heartbreak. This quote is a really sobering reminder that money is a huge deal in relationship. If you and your partner can get aligned on finances, you become a truly unstoppable team. So for our final section, let's get into the game plan. A fortress doesn't just sit there. It needs a strategy, a set of actions that you take every single day to build, to defend, and to grow your wealth. And here, we're going to focus on two of the absolute biggest action-based wealth killers out there: freaking out and bailing on your investments, and, the big one, carrying debt. The stock market is gonna go down. That's just what it does sometimes. But hitting the panic button and selling everything is the classic costly mistake. Think about it. Even the massive 2008 financial crisis recovered. When you jump out, all you're doing is locking in your losses and guaranteeing you miss the rebound. Investing is a long-term game. You have to learn to control your emotions and just stay the course. And this right here, this illustrates the final and maybe the most destructive wealth killer of them all: debt. It's so simple when you look at it like this. Every single dollar you pay in interest to a credit card company or a bank is a dollar that isn't earning interest for you. It's a choice. Debt drains your wealth and it destroys your dreams. Being debt-free, that lets your wealth grow and actually fund those dreams. So there you have it. We've unmasked the 10 wealth killers. We've gone through mindset, protections, relationships, and actions. But the single most important thing to take away from all this is simple. You are in control. You are the architect of your own financial fortress. And this final quote just says it all. Let this one sink in for a second. Building wealth isn't really about being some kind of genius. It's not about capability. It's about believing that you can actually do it and then taking the steps one by one to make it happen. You now have the blueprint. You know what these saboteurs look like and how they operate. So the only question left is, which one are you going to conquer first?
Have you ever wondered how someone builds a fortune that lasts for, I don't know, centuries? Not just for a lifetime. We're talking about real dynasties, the kind that literally shape history. Well, today, we're going to try and unlock the playbook of some of the world's most powerful families. You know, the Medicis, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. We're going to get into the secrets behind their epic rise, and in some cases, their spectacular fall.
So let's just dive right into the big question, right? How do you build a 500-year dynasty? It sounds simple, but the answer? Wow, it's incredibly complex. What's the real difference between a massive fortune that just vanishes in a couple of generations and a legacy that redefines the world for half a millennium? It turns out it's not just about making the money. It's about what you do with it, and maybe even more important, what your kids and grandkids do with it.
Okay, look at this. These two families are the perfect example of the two paths a fortune can take. On one side, you've got the Medici. They start a bank way back in the 14th century, and they end up funding the entire Italian Renaissance. We still feel their influence today. And then you've got the Vanderbilts. Cornelius Vanderbilt built up more wealth than the U.S. Treasury had at the time, and yet, just a few generations later, that fortune was pretty much gone. Poof! So you have two incredibly powerful dynasties, but two completely different endings. What went so right for one, and so wrong for the other?
To really get the life cycle of a fortune, you have to start at the very beginning. You have to start with the founder's vision. And these weren't just businesses they were building, they were creating radically new ways of thinking about industry, finance, and power itself.
So this idea, the holding company, it's literally the backbone of how modern corporations are structured. And guess what? It was pioneered by the Medici in the 15th century. They figured out that to scale their bank across Europe, they had to insulate their risk. So they created this central firm that managed all their different bank branches, from Florence all the way to London. It meant they could expand like crazy, and if one branch failed, it wouldn't sink the whole enterprise. It was a complete revolution in managing risk.
And their innovation, it didn't stop there. The Medici basically standardized double entry accounting. Yep, the whole assets equals liabilities plus equity thing we all learn about. It's how they meticulously tracked their wealth. They also popularized letters of credit, which made trading across countries way safer. And get this, it was also a super clever way to collect interest back when the church said charging interest was a sin. They literally wrote the rules for modern banking.
Now, this idea of controlling an entire system, it just evolved over the centuries. Fast forward to the industrial age, and you've got Henry Ford, who took this to a whole new level. His real genius wasn't just the assembly line, it was vertical integration. See, Ford didn't just build cars, he owned the entire process. He bought iron mines, huge forests for timber, his own fleet of freighters, even a railroad, all to feed his gigantic River Rouge plant. From the second that iron ore came out of the ground to the moment a Model T rolled off the line, Ford controlled every single step and every single penny.
And then there was John D. Rockefeller. He took that idea of integration and turned it into pure domination. His takeover of the oil industry was just breathtakingly fast. He didn't just compete with other companies, he swallowed them whole. By forming the Standard Oil Trust in 1882, he created a monopoly so powerful that he controlled pretty much every part of the American oil business, which is what made him the world's first ever billionaire.
So, you've built this massive empire. Now what do? Well, the second act for these dynasties was all about using that unprecedented wealth not just to live in luxury, but to actively shape the world around them. We're talking funding art, financing wars, and basically rewriting the rules of society.
Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, this number, $480 million, that's the price J.P. Morgan paid to buy Andrew Carnegie Steel Company back in 1901. In today's money, that's astronomical. That one single transaction made Carnegie the wealthiest man on the entire planet. This wasn't just business as usual. This was the consolidation of unbelievable industrial power into the hands of just a few guys.
And what's so fascinating is how differently each family decided to use that power. The Medici, of course, famously used their bank profits to support artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, which means they basically bankrolled the Renaissance. The Rothschilds? They became the financiers of governments, funding Britain's entire war effort against Napoleon. Henry Ford created a whole new middle class by paying his workers an unheard of $5 a day, making sure they could actually afford the cars they were building. And Rockefeller? Well, he used his monopoly to fundamentally change the American economy.
And this wasn't just random chance. This quote from Cosimo de' Medici, it reveals the whole strategy. Their patronage wasn't just because they loved beautiful art. It was a calculated tool for political control. By funding public works and propping up artists, they cemented their power in Florence until they became, as one pope put it, kings in all but name. It was brilliant.
But, every empire, no matter how big, faces the exact same challenge: succession. And this, right here, is the great test. When the founder is gone and that massive fortune passes to the next generation, does it become a foundation for something even greater, or does it just get frittered away?
Wow. This quote from a Vanderbilt heir, it perfectly captures the beginning of the end for their dynasty. You can hear it right there. For that third generation, the fortune wasn't a tool to build with anymore. It was a burden that took away all purpose and ambition. It became something to be spent, not grown.
And oh boy, did they spend it. The Vanderbilts basically became the poster children for Gilded Age excess. We're talking a whole row of massive mansions on Fifth Avenue, these enormous summer cottages in Newport that were actually palaces, and the Biltmore Estate, which is just huge.
By the time they were done building and partying and racing yachts, the original fortune from the railroad empire was basically gone.
Now, for a totally different perspective, look at Andrew Carnegie's philosophy. This is a huge contrast. After he became the richest man in the world, he published this essay called The Gospel of Wealth. And in it, he argued that it was the duty of the wealthy to give away their fortunes for the public good while they were still alive. It was a complete rejection of the whole Vanderbilt model of passing down fortunes and living in luxury.
And he wasn't just talking to big game. This number, 2,509, that's how many public libraries Andrew Carnegie funded all across the English-speaking world. His philosophy had a real, tangible, lasting result. Instead of building private palaces for himself, he built public institutions for everyone, creating a legacy that had nothing to do with passing money down to his own heirs.
The Rothschilds? Well, they chose a third path: absolute, ruthless control. Mayor Rothschild's will laid out this incredibly rigid system just to preserve the family fortune. Only male heirs could inherit. To stop the money from getting diluted by marriage, he actually encouraged marriages between cousins. It was a cold, calculated strategy designed for one single purpose: to make sure the family's wealth and power would last for centuries.
The Rockefellers, well, they found their purpose in a moment of crisis. The family's reputation was just awful because of their monopoly, and it all came to a head with the violent 1914 Ludlow massacre at a mine their company owned. That terrible event pushed John D. Rockefeller Jr. to completely pivot the family's focus toward huge, systematic philanthropy. They started using their incredible wealth to fund medical research, education, the arts. It was a way to redeem the family name and build a new, much more positive legacy.
So, after looking at all these epic stories of rising and falling, what are the big lessons we can pull from these dynasties? What really separates a fortune that's just temporary from a legacy that actually endures?
When you lay it out like this, the lesson becomes pretty clear. What fades is the lavish spending, the focus on just maintaining appearances, the personal luxury, all the stuff we saw with the Vanderbilts. And what lasts? Things like disruptive innovation like Ford's, a crystal-clear vision like the Rothschilds, and strategic philanthropy that builds public institutions like Carnegie and the Rockefellers did.
So if you were to write a blueprint for a lasting dynasty, it might look something like this. First, you have to innovate. Don't just join an industry, completely reinvent it. Second, you have to consciously wield the power that comes with wealth to shape the world. Third, and this is crucial, you have to have a clear, deliberate plan for what happens next for succession. And finally, you have to define a legacy that's about more than just money by redirecting that fortune toward the public good.
Ultimately, I think the stories of all these families really leave us with this one question. The money, the mansions, the monopolies, a lot of that is gone now. But what's still here? The institutions, the art, the ideas, the innovations. It really makes you think that while pretty much anyone might be able to make a fortune, building a legacy that truly lasts, well, that's a whole other story.